Relationship building is key to purposeful stakeholder engagement. Different stakeholders require different approaches for engagement. They can also present different challenges and opportunities. Analyzing and understanding stakeholders' interests, motivations, structure, values, and customs is crucial so that we can identify the right advocacy targets, build strong relationships, and get the best protection results. In most crisis settings, many key stakeholders are linked by pre-existing intricate, often conflictual, relationships and interdependencies. Regardless of the nature of these links, they must be analyzed and taken into consideration when engaging in protection advocacy. Here, we listen to Major Stuart Thomas, Information Operations Deputy Chief from MINUSMA in Mali, as he talks us through his stakeholder analysis and engagement process.
So my apologies. I am currently hotspotting off of my phone because the local Wi-Fi, which was working great until a minute ago, decided to die right before this meeting. I am currently in Nepal, but as I said, based out of MINUSMA. And from a kind of humanitarian state actor engagement background, I deployed as part of the Rapid Reaction Response Force to Nepal here for the disaster earthquake in 2015. And I also deployed to Poland more recently and worked on a lot of bit of advocacy and protection of civilians in regard to the refugee population in the Polish-run camps, or not camps, but reception centers. And then presently working in MINUSMA, which is a complex humanitarian environment for sure. So kind of to go from my kind of process to the end state here, given the time limit, is just to emphasize the first step for me is absolutely to identify what the desired behavior change is or what the effect I want to achieve is. And the reason I emphasize that is a lot of meetings become routine. You have a lot of engagements and you default to trying to leverage existent meetings or existent relationships to achieve a change, even if the people you're talking to aren't actually the best suited for that. And so when I'm looking to achieve a behavior change, that's my first step, is doing a lot of time in analyzing specifically what the change is, because otherwise you spend a lot of time, for instance, from a military perspective, we try and build support. Oh, we want the locals to like us, but that is just a means to achieve a change, not an objective in of itself. So taking the time to really focus on what the final behavior change you want is, and then reverse engineering that to who are the people who can affect that, and then going into the meeting and engagements. The next key thing I'll do when I'm planning engagements is to decide what I want to achieve per engagement. There's a really bad habit inside of the force, from the military especially, but I think it's true for all of us, to try and do everything right away in the first engagement, and not taking the time to really map out what can I realistically achieve in my first meeting, what can I achieve in my second meeting and third. And when we talk about cross-cultural communication, taking that time to think about what each meeting can achieve, I think is really crucial. Because for many, if you try and talk business in the first meeting, you're actually going to burn the relationship. And that's particularly true in high trust areas. And in armed conflict, that's very much the case. And then once we've identified my kind of rough plan, so meeting 1, I'm going to do rapport building only. Meeting 2, I want to get this. Meeting 3, this. And then even once I've achieved my change, I'll always try and follow up with repeated meetings to cement the change and make sure that whatever I'm looking to achieve is echoed on. And so that's kind of some of the big points I wanted to make there. I believe added to your resources is a planning tool that we have developed. That one there is modified from a Canadian military. But that is a very, very handy tool for rapid dynamic planning, where you go in and it's going to start top to bottom. What am I trying to achieve? Who am I achieving it with? What am I doing in each meeting? And then when I'm getting into the planning for the meeting itself, I'm going to say, okay, how am I breaking the ice? You know, I'm a Canadian, so my default is usually the weather. I don't have kids, but family is a really good rapport breaking, ice breaking one. It has not usually very little to do with the main topic, but it's just something that can establish that we're both human, that we both have common opinions, and to kind of establish that rapport first. No matter how quick little time I have, even if I only have 10 minutes, I will always start with some kind of rapport ice breaking thing. And if I can plan ahead, that's always key. I'm then going to lay out my initial arguments for whatever the behavior change is. And when I'm looking at my arguments, I'm going to identify different approaches for different audiences. So what are the needs, wants, and desires of who I'm talking to? You know, what is their value? So if you're talking to an armed actor, usually it's control of access, control of terrain, or control of populations. And so when I'm looking to change his behavior, how can I present my arguments to demonstrate how he's either not losing any of that, or how even enabling me in my change helps him, or them, I should say. And so I'm addressing it from that way. So how can I tailor my arguments to address a need, want, and desire from their perspective? And so when we're talking access control, especially for local forces, often they have population that they care about in that region. And so you can leverage on that. So if you give me access, the people that you care about will benefit, and so forth and so on. And then I'm going to have my arguments, my supporting arguments. And then I'll always build 2 exit strategies. I have an exit strategy for when my meeting goes well. So when we have a success and we make an agreement, how am I going to cement that? Can I get him to sign something to say that they've agreed to whatever they've just agreed on? Can I take a picture with them with the classic handshake? Even better, can we make some kind of joint press statement? Can I make a public address where he demonstrates or they demonstrate publicly that they've agreed to whatever it is we've just agreed on? And then how can I leverage that? Can I use the success I've had with him to then engage another stakeholder as kind of a bandwagon effect where I can get other people, hey, that local commander let us do this or has started doing this. Maybe you should too. So those are kind of my exit strategies, positive. And then I have an exit strategy negative. And the key thing here is to always make sure I leave the conditions open for another meeting. So no matter how bad my engagement has gone, how can I make sure that I can have a follow-up? And even if it's not with me, right? So if I have absolutely burned the bridge with him, I realized this meeting didn't go well. Is it okay if my colleague contacts you in a week or 2 and maybe we can follow up on some other topics? Something to try and keep that door open for follow-on engagements. In terms of stakeholder mapping, to tie it to that a bit, I'm a big proponent of not trying to leap across the water, but build a bridge. So if I identify a key person that I want to meet with, I will try and work my way outside in. And so that by the time I meet with that person, I've already established relationships with people that they trust as an authority. And I'm already hopefully have people that will vote or support me as a credible person to talk to. And so I'm not trying to jump all the way to trusted partner or trusted source in one meeting. I've already met with counterparts. If I'm talking with armed actors or militaries, the usual best way is through another armed actor or military. And so if that's the state or local military as a proxy. So in Poland, when I was trying to change how reception centers were conducting business, my best leverage as a foreign military was the Polish military. So going through them. So it was a Polish person helping me to communicate to a Polish civilian to achieve that desired change. I would highly suspect, I've only done this as a soldier in uniform, but I strongly suspect that the inverse is true. So if the Polish civilians wanted to change my military's behavior, their best approach would have been to go through that, either along with or through that uniform presence. Yeah, so I think in terms of a ratio, I would probably say 2/3 time analysis, 1/3 planning. And so the bulk of my planning time is going to be on that, analyzing who I should be talking, like what I want to achieve, because often I'll be given pretty vague direction, right? So go and achieve this. And when I have to do that deeper analysis to really identify what the key change is there. So that's a good chunk of time. And then really, once I've identified who I need to talk to, I spend a lot of time trying to find out their human network. So their links and their associations, just like the classic kind of LinkedIn. If I'm applying for a job, I go on LinkedIn. Oh, do I know anyone that knows that company? And then I can go through that. And I do kind of a similar thing from a humanitarian or military perspective. So who do I know that touches either in their organization or touches their organization, that I kind of build that springboard effect off. And then only about 1/3 of my time then will be spent building that actual arguments and discussion points for the engagement itself. Because once you've done that analysis, pretty much the plan should write itself from there if it's done properly. And then I will back up a little bit to say that this is an advantage that militaries often have, is they have a lot of pre-built stuff going into missions that we can then lean on. So a lot of that analysis work has already been done pre-crisis or pre-intervention that we can kind of reach back onto and leverage. The downside of being a uniformed service is we are usually very constrained on who we can talk to. And even within a peacekeeping context, there are definitely audiences that we have been directed not to engage. And then there's legal ramifications for some actors. So for instance, engaging in discussions with terrorist organizations can have sanction and legal implications for organizations. And so the answer is the only way I know of to kind of counteract that is through proxies and finding intermediaries that can engage and building that coalition, those allies on your list to try and identify allies that aren't as restricted, that can engage, that have a shared goal, and then conveying to them the need. That's the key there of building kind of the coalitions, those allies, and that network to be able to work around these factors. My history and experience with IHL or human rights intervention is very limited, but on a what I'll call enforced behavior change where there's potential consequences to not conforming or not conducting the exchange, the strong caveat I would attach to it is if you're going to threat or make a statement of consequence, there needs to then be follow-up, or you're then in the long term undermining your credibility. And so, you know, if I'm on a military convoy and I need access to a village and there's an armed actor that won't let me, and I say, well, if you don't, then when we come back, we're going to force our way through. And then the next time the next platoon commander comes in and goes through the exact same negotiation again and tries to do the same thing, and there were no consequences, then as an organization, I'm losing credibility. That applies to promises of good things as well. So if you've conveyed that there's benefits, for instance, you know, fiscal or access to resources that would be otherwise blocked from cooperation, and then you don't follow through with that, there's a say-do gap that's going to have significant consequences to your long-term credibility. And I don't know why, but that seems to be the one thing that everyone shares about you really quickly. So if you break that trust with one actor, that reputation seems to spread very, very quickly. Whereas the fact that you're helpful and good doesn't seem to spread anywhere near as quickly. But that breaking of trust and retaining trust, I think is key. And so just balancing again, if you're going to use a carrot or a stick, you need to make sure you can actually use the carrot and actually deliver on the stick, or I think you lose that trust. My really short answer is time spent in analysis. And so when you build those networks and those link analysis, you'll begin to understand and have a better appreciation for how affecting one affects the others. And so the better your situational understanding is, the faster and more accurate your assessments will be. So I think, again, time spent in analysis is never wasted in this regard. It's going to be your best effort. And I strongly recommend a formal risk analysis. So probability versus severity and mapping that out is the tool I use. I think a formal process to do that is key, but I would caution against getting crippled by risk analysis. So you can always what if forever. And so I would, identify the major ones, evaluate that, and then is it worth it? Is it not? And if you're in the gray zone, then you spend more time. But if you kind of look at worst case scenario and most likely scenario, and as long as worst case doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, and most likely is still successful, if you just look at those two as a basis, I think that's a minimum that will get you kind of moving forward on your planning. Because we've probably all experienced where we spend an infinite amount of time trying to figure out what if, and then we cripple our action cycle. First off, whether you do it individually or as a team, I absolutely think the product requires more than one opinion, and ideally that of a diverse group. So you don't just have essentially heterosexual cisgendered male, military looking at a problem set, and then no one else's perspective. So multi-perspective, I think, is key, especially when you're dealing with cross-culture. So trying to engage with local expertise when you're doing that, I think, is one big step. The other one on that particular tool is recognizing that it's kind of a situation specific. So when you're focusing on where you put the stakeholders, it's very much tied to A, who you are, and B, what you're trying to achieve. And the map moves depending on what it is you're trying to do. Because one caution is you build one map and you try and use it for all things, and not recognizing that if your desired objective changes, then how people feel about it and where they sit on that scale shifts as well. But definitely cannot cement the need to have more than one person look at it. I'm a strong believer that one is none when it comes to analysis. Just to take 2 seconds to thank you guys for what you do. Especially humanitarian rights are key for long-term success for the globe and humanity. So thank you for your work, and best of luck with the rest of the course.